All right, let's dive in. Today we're talking about a period that didn't just change a continent, it literally built the foundations of the world we're all living in right now. We're talking about the European Renaissance, a time of massive, world-altering transformation.
So, the name itself is our first big clue. Renaissance is French for rebirth, and it's such a powerful idea that you see it in other languages too, like the Arabic an-nahda. This wasn't just a rebirth of art or science, though. It was a rebirth in how people saw themselves and their place in the universe.
Which really brings us to the big question here. What actually happens when a whole continent digs up its ancient past, not just to admire it, but to use it to totally reinvent its future? That's the story we're going to unpack.
So where does this all kick off? Well, this cultural explosion wasn't random. It had an epicenter, and that epicenter was 14th century Italy.
Yeah, it's the natural question, right? Why here? Of all the places in Europe, what made Italy the perfect incubator for this incredible change? Well, the answer is this kind of perfect storm of history, money, and ideas all coming together at once.
I mean, it was the perfect setup. First off, Italy was literally built on top of the old Roman Empire. The past was everywhere you looked. Then you had these super wealthy city-states like Florence getting rich off of trade, and they started pouring money into art and universities. And then the final piece of the puzzle. When Constantinople fell, scholars fled west, and they brought with them a treasure trove of ancient Greek texts that had been lost to Europe for centuries. All the ingredients were there.
But this perfect storm, it didn't just lead to pretty paintings. It sparked a revolutionary new idea, a total shift in how people saw the world. For centuries, everything was about God. But now, the focus was starting to shift towards us, towards humanity.
And this shift was huge. The medieval world was all about the collective, about God, about preparing for the afterlife. The Renaissance completely flips that script. It starts championing human potential, individual genius, and the idea that life on Earth matters, right here and now. And this radical new philosophy got a name: humanism.
So what was humanism exactly? Here's the key thing to get. It wasn't about rejecting religion. Not at all. Humanists basically said, hey, humans were created in God's image, so our potential for greatness is incredible. They dove into those old Greek and Roman texts, not just for religious wisdom, but for lessons on how to build a better society, create better art, and just understand what it means to be human.
And you could literally see this new philosophy everywhere. Art just completely transformed. You had artists like Donatello making sculptures that were so realistic, they were just bursting with human emotion. Architects like Brunelleschi used math to create these incredibly beautiful and harmonious buildings. Art was suddenly about more than just telling Bible stories. It was a way to explore the beauty of the real world and the people in it.
And this focus on practical reality didn't just stop at art, it jumped right into politics. Niccolo Machiavelli, in his famous book The Prince, made this totally radical argument. He said that for a ruler to succeed, it wasn't about being a good person, it was about holding on to power, period. He basically argued for separating politics from morality and religion, a truly secular view of power that still gets talked about constantly today.
You know, once you start telling people to think for themselves, to read the original source material, and to question tradition, it's really only a matter of time before they start questioning the biggest, most powerful institution around, the Catholic Church. 95. That's it. Just a number. But it was a number that would crack the very foundation of Christian Europe and kick off a century of chaos.
And that number, of course, brings us to the German monk Martin Luther. On Halloween in 1517, he was furious about the church selling something called indulgences, which was basically a way to buy forgiveness for your sins. So he nailed a list of 95 arguments, or theses, against it on a church door. It was supposed to be a scholarly debate. It ended up being a revolution.
And his arguments were explosive. He basically said, forget it. You can't buy your way into heaven. Salvation comes from faith alone. He said God's grace is a free gift. You can't put a price tag on it. And maybe the biggest one of all, the ultimate authority isn't the Pope or the Church. It's the Bible itself, and everyone should be able to read it. That was the spark that lit the fire of the Protestant Reformation.
But this Renaissance spirit of curiosity and, frankly, ambition, it couldn't be contained in Europe. It pushed Europeans to the absolute edges of their maps, and then to just sail right off them into the unknown.
And the speed of it all was just breathtaking. In a little over 30 years, you have explorers, backed by kingdoms like Spain and Portugal, just completely redrawing the map of the world. The voyages of people like Diaz, Columbus, da Gama, and Magellan didn't just find new lands, they shattered old ideas about what the world even was.
And the results of that? Well, they were massive and they were permanent. The center of the world's economy shifted from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Power was no longer about regional kingdoms. It was about building huge colonial empires. And for the very first time, we had a truly global economy, connecting every continent in a new, complicated web of trade and conquest.
So let's pull all these threads together. This stuff isn't just dusty old history. The ripples from the Renaissance are still shaping our world in really fundamental ways. We are, in so many ways, its children.
I mean, just think about it. The idea of the nation-state, the scientific method, our global economy, our modern obsession with the individual, all of these things have deep roots in the Renaissance. But that's not the whole story, is it? Because that same era of discovery also gave birth to a much darker legacy, the brutal reality of European colonialism.
And that leaves us with a really tough, complicated question to think about. The Renaissance was this rebirth that celebrated human genius and unleashed unbelievable potential. But it also unleashed forces of conquest and exploitation on a scale the world had never seen. It's a dual legacy, one of incredible light and incredible shadow. And figuring out how to hold both of those truths at the same time, well, that's one of the great challenges we've inherited from this remarkable and truly revolutionary time. Thanks for watching.